Greetings, future teachers. Today we're going to learn direct instruction, teaching strategy, and Killen'S chapter 6 book as proceeding. What are we going to learn? This lesson will highlight the teaching strategies, how we are going to determine what is direct instruction, discuss the strengths and the weaknesses of direct instruction, evaluate provided guidelines for planning and implementing the strategy, and determine suggested ways in which we evaluate the success of your direct instruction. Now, what is direct instruction teaching strategy? It's a teacher-centered approach delivering academic content subjected to the learners, informing them of demonstrations or lectures about the content. Teachers are to obtain total or maximum control over what, when, and how students learn with strong research support. Direct instruction can be used to introduce a new content with limited prior knowledge. Direct instruction gives an overview of the content into interconnections of concepts, showing how the problem is approached, making it less intimidating for the learner, building a basic knowledge and skills of the concepts which allow practicing problem solving and knowledge seeking easy. Direct instruction may give direction towards the learner studying, allowing them to independently practice, or rather letting the learner seek the knowledge for themselves. Now, the weakness and strengths of this teaching strategy: limited involvement during direct instruction also limits the opportunity for the child to be social and develop interpersonal skills in a manner that if I teach in a class, I'm in front of them, it's only me talking. It's a one-way communication, limiting opportunities to debate issues, and it's only giving away the teacher's view about the content, and that does actually have some form of hindering for the teacher, because I'm not gaining any feedback at the moment of the learner's understanding. And direct instruction, it's very difficult to cater to all learners' abilities, prior knowledge, interest in the subjects, the rates of their learning, the levels of understanding, and their learning styles, given the fact that the learner may not have the ability to listen to you and retain that listening while you are speaking for a whole 15 minutes during the lesson. The child might not have the prior knowledge about that content you are teaching them. For example, if I am teaching a child about a yacht, no child who's coming from a lower class background would have seen it, touched it, or even be in it, because it's something that mostly is reachable for the middle class or the upper class level people. Another weakness would be it's heavily reliant on the ability for the child to take notes, to observe, to listen, which is not very good if the child is not really skilled in that manner and it's not their greatest learning ability and learning style. The strength of it, though, it works very well in allowing the teacher to show the skills and the practice needed to master the skill content. It builds great foundation for the knowledge. It allows the child to later seek themselves the knowledge, so it turns into a learner-centered strategy. And direct instruction reduces a lot of cognitive load on the the learner's working memory, because it's only you giving the the content. It doesn't necessarily have to think much about it, because you're outlining and you are putting all the interconnections of the concepts in the board, or just explaining it out loud. It's very opposite from discovery approach, because discovery's approach need you to search for the answers. It's scaffolding. It requires the child to seek more of the knowledge. For an example, if I tell the child, does the metal shine with acid, if you rub it with acid or alkaline? That's me questioning the child on a specific content. It's not me just telling him in direct instruction that if you want to clean a coin, put it in vinegar, which is an acid, and rub it as really hard, which is a content that's covered in grade 5, properties of metals, which the YouTube channels also cover later on. Back to direct instruction, one of the strength is the teacher allows to create a non-threatening learning environment, very stress-free, because the load of learning at the time while you're still presenting content is not on the learner, but it's on the teacher. It's the teacher's responsibility to make the learner understand the content, since he or she has limited prior knowledge. When is it good to use it or not? Using direct instruction is good to use it if the learners have limited prior knowledge on the topic. The concept and relationship you want learners to understand are very complex and difficult to identify. If you want the learner to focus on learning rather than the procedure of learning, if you want to introduce learners to a broad range of ideas and example in a short space of time, if the learners lack the skills to learn independently or collaborate together, it's not a good idea to use this direct instruction. If your learners are highly motivated to work independently or collaborate, if the content learned stimulates it needs a lot of time to stimulate the child's curiosity towards learning it, if it has extreme variation, if you have extreme variation of learners, if they like a huge difference, a huge range of, if your learners, all of them are so different in knowing the prior knowledge and their abilities, then it's not a good idea to just use this learning strategy. If you want your learners to develop their social skills and interpersonal skills while learning the contents, then it's not a good idea to use this teacher-centered teaching strategy, because you want them to collab and you want them to be in a social space together to have social skills. So in that case, it would be great to use discussion, small group teaching strategy, and so on. The content, if the content itself requires the individual to interpret and adapt to it, it may need inquiring teaching strategy instead of direct instruction. Now, key aspects of effective direct instruction: it's very important to perform cognitive clarity, meaning that the teacher, before you even start the lesson, it's very recommended for you to tell the child the learning outcomes we need to achieve from this lesson, and give out a brief lesson content, like before the lesson, whether it's key questions or what to expect kind of segments, and pacing your content, keeping in mind and making it suitable for your learners. Instructional variancy, that's very important because you want your direct instruction to not be too broad or too long for the kid, and you want to accommodate all of your learners' different learning styles. And so presenting it differently, such as handouts, PowerPoints, even referring them to a video in or a different a television program that presents these lessons main ideas, would be great. Another way is to emphasize main ideas during the lesson by writing on the board and saying, yes, that is exactly what I'm looking for, and pointing out that they've found the main idea of the content, or just you putting it out there that this is what we actually learning for in the lesson. Another way is to ask them questions. This is a form of scaffolding for them to have the curiosity about the content and really get a good feedback on the learner's understanding and progress in their understanding. Task orientation is important because it keeps the learners focused on the learning outcomes. Ask questions prior to their thinking. What would they say, tasting the prior knowledge? It is also task orientation. Task orientation, an example of it, as I mentioned before, the use of key questions, often mentioning lesson outcomes. Another thing is just managing your class effectively, making it a learning environment. Keep reminding them that we have a goal to achieve. We have to be actively learning, and you as a teacher keeping a close monitoring to the child's progress, and keeping in mind as a teacher you are also responsible for their learning. That is task orientation during classroom lessons. Behaviors that supports the key aspects of effective teaching. Now, one of the things that I've learned during the progress of the lesson is that it's very helpful to bring them back in and have learner engagement by using their ideas, asking them, what do you think about this, what do you think about that? If they have statements, you put it on the board, you write it on the board, you emphasize it. Is there anyone else who wants to put it in your own words? Let's modify the concepts that we just learned and rephrase it in your own words, and place it and write it on the board. Each idea the child your learners say out, write it on the board, and keep saying this person's idea, this learner's idea. Just list it as a list, and say that they've been very brilliant at summarizing, and possibly if you need to compare the similarities and differences of their ideas, it would be very helpful, because now you're giving feedback to them where they lack, where they are strong, and where they need to go back and summarize the content's key points. And this really enhances the learner's engagement into learning processes. It's really the child's personal experience on how they see the content, and they feel valued to contribute within the lesson. Structuring, it's really your lesson plan, because you start off with a question, you test their prior knowledge, you give them an overview of the lesson, a brief overview before you start with, this is what I expect you to do, which is listen. Is this what you've experienced, which is prior knowledge? Have you ever? And giving them a sense of being organized, because in the beginning of the lesson, it's very important to say out the purpose of the lesson, which is learning outcomes, and giving them a sense of being organized in the content, because you are pacing them, you are presenting the content to them step by step. Telling the learners what are the goals to learn, show learners something unexpected to create cognitive dissonance. That is when, let's say for an example, we are learning about planets in natural science, and kids understand that the Earth is part of the planets and it's within the orbits, and you tell them, well, the Earth revolves around the sun. That will shake their knowledge, because it's a new piece of information that's kind of different with what they know. So it transforms their thinking, and it stimulates their curiosity enough to want to learn more. Structuring is also a method that is pre-instructional strategy. Now, when it comes to planning and implementing direct instruction, it's very recommended for you to write down your lesson outcomes. What are we going to learn? What is the purpose of this lesson? What are we trying to achieve? Which is the goal? For an example, if we are learning about the change of states, there's gases, solids, liquid, you are going to tell the child what's the difference, similarities, and what is change of state. So your learn outcome is for the to determine change of stage. Now you as a child, at the end of this lesson, as a learner, you should be able to tell me what is change of state. So that's a lesson outcome as an example. Selecting lesson content is important, because it puts you in understanding of the purpose, the key concepts, interconnections between them of the context. Organizing lesson content is important, because it gives a child the ability to put everything in place. Going back to selecting, number 2, selecting lesson content, there's something called schemata theory, whereby you give a child an opportunity to build from their prior knowledge, adding on new information, building on top of their prior knowledge. That is called accommodation and assimilation. So selecting your lesson content just according to their prior knowledge makes a huge difference, because it allows assimilation and accommodation. Number 3, organizing your lesson content. You as a teacher are showing the child step by step on how to see the content, so the child learns how to take in the content and put it in an organized manner, eating the steak bite by bite. And preparing lesson notes is also very much recommended, because you want to achieve your lesson outcomes within that time period given in the lesson. So for you to know how to pace yourself as the teacher, for you to understand how much the child needs to learn and accommodates different learning instructional variation and learning styles, you need to know your notes as a teacher. Checking the learner's understanding. As we've mentioned, this is really the overview of how a lesson should go about. Basic structure, introduction / overall, ask questions to stimulate curiosity, which is key questions. An example, test their prior knowledge to build onto the current lesson's content. Tell the child, why are we learning this content? Just for them to have relevance, to see relevance to the content in their life. Tell the child how to learn this and how to apply it, or how are they going to be assessed later on. And during the learning phase, it's very important for you to give clear explanation of the content, meditate learning, monitor their progress, whether you are asking them questions, do you understand this part during the lesson, and testing them where and how they might have fallen short. So it's very important to test their understanding about the content. As I said, provide feedback and encouragement to the learner if they have answered your question right. Do you understand this? Explain it to me. And they done it well. Yes, very good. That encouragement is highly recommended to give more enthusiasm to learn from a child. And lastly, the closure part of the lesson is to give homework, formative assessment, homework, classwork, whichever type of assessment that you feel is well relative to the content, and explaining them what's going to happen pertaining this context to the next lesson. What have we learned? This lesson has highlighted what is indirect instruction teaching as a teacher-based, a teacher-centered, making learners passive receivers of information, has discussed strengths and weaknesses of direct instruction within the lesson, evaluated guidelines for planning and implementing the strategy, looking at the lesson planning and introductory learning phase using effective behaviors, key experts, and planning for effective implementing of direct instruction. It has also determined suggested ways in which you can evaluate the success of your teaching direct instruction within a lesson plan and assessment for evaluation. In conclusion, a good example would be watching this teaching strategy performed grade 4 natural science change of state lessons by Ms. Mfeka. That's the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you share, like, comment on the current lesson, and for more topics you may want me to research and give you summary as a video. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.